Welcome to Glow 99.1 FM, Education Trends 2025, exploring how Nigeria and the world are shaping the future of learning. Without further ado, let's dive in.
This is your Education News podcast, bringing you the biggest stories shaping classrooms, teachers, and students across Nigeria, Africa, and the rest of the world. Today, we look at the global learning crisis, climate shocks keeping children out of school, major curriculum changes in Nigeria, the rise of education technology in Africa, and bold new moves in higher education. Stay with me as we connect the headlines to what they really mean for learners, parents, and teachers. First, the big global picture. A new international report on crisis-affected children says an estimated 234 million school-aged children living in crisis zones now need urgent support just to access quality education. Out of this number, around 85 million children are not in school at all. The report warns that in many emergency settings, even when children are physically inside a classroom, they are not learning enough. Less than 1 in 5 crisis-affected children are able to read at the minimum expected level by the end of primary school. Conflicts, displacement, natural disasters, and economic shocks are combining to turn education into a luxury for millions of children instead of a basic right. For countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, this learning crisis is especially severe. Many of the worst affected children live in places where schools have been damaged, teachers have fled, or families simply cannot afford to keep children in class. The message from experts is clear. If we fail this generation in education, we are locking in poverty and instability for decades. Our second story stays global but focuses on a different threat to learning: the climate crisis. A recent UN Children's Agency report estimates that in 1 year alone, extreme weather disrupted schooling for at least 240 million children across more than 80 countries. Heat waves, floods, cyclones, and storms all played a role. In some regions, classrooms were too hot to use safely. In others, schools were flooded, damaged, or converted into shelters for displaced families. Low-income countries, especially in parts of Asia and sub-Saharan Africa, were hit hardest, with children missing weeks or months of learning time. The report stresses that many school buildings were never designed for the types of weather we are now seeing. Roofs cannot cope with storms, drainage systems fail under heavy rains, and there is little or no cooling during dangerous heat. The call to action is for climate-resilient schools, safer buildings, better ventilation and water systems, and contingency plans that keep learning going even during climate shocks. We turn now to Africa, where education technology is being positioned as a key part of the solution. A recent analysis on the continent's education systems notes that sub-Saharan Africa has roughly 98 million children out of school and also faces an estimated shortage of about 15 million teachers. Against this backdrop, education technology platforms are trying to close the gap. In Kenya, for example, a mobile-based learning service has reached millions of learners using basic phones and has recorded measurable improvement in exam performance. In Tanzania, children are following educational programs on television and radio that combine storytelling, animation, and curriculum-based content. Across the continent, platforms that offer digital lessons, assessment, and data dashboards for schools are expanding. For African students in rural or low-income communities, this shift could be transformative, but only if connectivity, electricity, and device access improve as well. The same reports caution that technology is not magic. Without trained teachers, local language content, and stable internet, the digital revolution can easily reinforce existing inequalities. Let's come home to Nigeria, where the federal government has announced one of the most significant curriculum reforms in recent years. The new structure is designed to reduce subject overload while strengthening digital, vocational, and citizenship education. Under the revised framework, pupils in the early primary classes will now take around 9 to 10 subjects instead of as many as 15. Older primary and junior secondary students will also see a reduction in the number of subjects they carry, while senior secondary students are expected to offer 8 or 9 subjects with a sharper focus on core areas and one trade subject. A new subject called Citizenship and Heritage Studies merges elements of history, civic education, and social studies. Nigerian history is being re-emphasized, and trade subjects have been streamlined to a smaller list of practical options such as solar installation and maintenance, fashion and garment making, livestock production, beauty and cosmetology, computer hardware and phone repairs, and horticulture. The goal is to make learning more focused, less stressful, and more relevant to the modern economy. Education officials say implementation will start with new entry classes at each level, and that exam bodies are already aligning their syllabi to the new structure. However, some stakeholders have raised concerns about communication, teacher preparation, and how quickly schools can realistically adapt. Parents and students are being advised to watch official channels closely for clear guidance on how the changes affect them. Still in Nigeria, security around schools remains a critical education story. In the country's northern states, abductions of students by armed groups have continued over the past decade, with well over 1,500 children reported kidnapped from schools in multiple incidents. These attacks are often carried out by heavily armed bandits or insurgent groups who see schools as soft targets. They disrupt learning, traumatize entire communities, and push parents to withdraw children from formal education altogether, especially girls. Analysts warn that every successful attack reinforces the perception that boarding schools and rural schools are unsafe. In response, government and partners have pledged stronger implementation of the Safe Schools agenda, including perimeter fencing, early warning systems, better coordination between security agencies and school authorities, and psychosocial support for survivors. But many schools, especially in remote areas, still lack basic protection. The broader message is that there can be no serious progress in education if children, teachers, and families do not feel safe walking into a classroom. Teacher shortages are not only an African or Nigerian issue. A recent international survey of schools found that some high-income countries are now facing some of the worst teacher gaps in the world. In one example from a developed country, more than 40% of lower secondary school principals said that a lack of teachers in their schools was directly harming the quality of instruction. Regional and disadvantaged schools suffered the most. Teachers report extremely long working hours, high stress, and growing mental health challenges. Many are considering leaving the profession early, and younger graduates are less willing to enter teaching in the first place. The lesson for all countries, including Nigeria, is that curriculum reform and technology will not succeed if the teaching workforce is exhausted, underpaid, or leaving the classroom. Experts are calling for better pay, lighter workloads, more support staff, and stronger professional development pathways. In simple terms, if we do not take care of teachers, we cannot take care of students. Finally, to higher education, where new transnational campuses are reshaping the map. One of the most closely watched developments for Africa is the decision of India to establish the first overseas campus of an Indian Institute of Technology in Nigeria. Indian Institute of Technology, or IITs, are among India's most respected engineering and technology institutions. The planned campus in Nigeria is expected to focus on science, technology, engineering, and innovation, with the aim to train a new generation of high-level professionals on the African continent. Details on programs, locations, and timelines are still being developed, but the move has been welcomed as a sign that Africa is increasingly seen as a partner in advanced education, not just a recipient of aid. Education analysts say such partnerships can expand access to top-tier programs, encourage joint research and innovation, and reduce the need for expensive study abroad. The challenge, as always, is to ensure that these campuses remain accessible to talented students from ordinary backgrounds, not just the very rich. You have been listening to our Education News Roundup, covering the global learning crisis, climate threats to schooling, digital innovation in Africa, Nigeria's new curriculum, school safety.
No other sound beats this. From dusk till dawn, we are the people's voice. Keep it locked on Glow 99.1 FM.